You guys really love combining drugs with other drugs, huh? Who could have possibly guessed? It's finally time to talk about one of the craziest drug combos I've ever tried, but before I talk about this craziness, I want to make sure you guys know that this isn't something to take lightly. I'm definitely not promoting anyone actually does this. We're going to talk about just how intense and potentially uncomfortable this combination can get in a minute, but yeah, educational purposes only. Because K is a dissociative and psychedelics are psychedelics, you can expect a really profound and multi-dimensional synergy, kind of like you might get with nitrous. But nitrous is like a really short wave that peaks really hard and really fast, whilst ketamine gives you a solid 30 to 90 minutes to really explore these realms in a typically calmer way. But of course this is all dose dependent, and again I gotta warn you guys that combining these two can and often does create an exponential synergy where something like 20 mg of ketamine that would barely affect you sober might double the intensity of your trip, or at the very least add a few layers to all of your thoughts. That's why we wait at least till the peak, we start low and we work our way up responsibly. We don't just snort 120 mg on a high dose of 2CB and weed and go on what feels like the peak of a nitrous trip for an hour. Trip Pro coming soon. But moving on, there is a big, juicy, often desirable difference between combining weed and psychedelics versus ketamine and psychedelics. K often reduces anxiety, whilst for many, weed tends to do the opposite. I've even tripped with multiple friends who were able to use ketamine to take the edge off. But that also doesn't mean it's going to remove your anxiety. Many times I've taken ketamine and the increased intensity made me as anxious as Hitler on mushrooms and maybe meth. A couple of other differences I've personally noticed is that combining psychedelics with ketamine kind of feels like it gives me more clarity and just obviousness. The experience might become weirdly more controllable, clean and crisp, whereas with weed, things trend towards being more confusing and hazy, even if they become more defined. But there's also a huge con with ketamine, which is that you can't really take it orally, or at least you shouldn't if you don't want to piss your life away. But snorting it really isn't ideal either. I've snorted ketamine a few times when tripping, and honestly, it can go both ways. On some trips, you might be so accepting that the physical discomfort is fine. After all, some of us do take public transport at rush hour. But snorting ketamine often involves some pain, a clogged nose, and a really disgusting drip that lasts decently long, especially if time has slowed down. All of that sucks when you're sober, for some people more than others.
Instantly clogged. How do you guys do that?
When you're tripping, these unpleasant effects can be amplified as fuck, and it's really not the ideal way to come up into a more intense experience. So if you absolutely have to snort it, I recommend making a K nasal spray. It's not too difficult and it's going to be healthier and more pleasant to use. I have an ultimate guide to taking ketamine video on my to-do list where I explain how to do this and show you an even better method that involves no pain or discomfort, so check that out. I'll make sure to leave a pinned comment when it's done. Another thing is that there's actually two types of ketamine and they're going to vary in effects. Now bear with me, I'm already struggling to explain this topic, so to add in even more variables makes explaining this harder than thinking of a good joke to make right now. Fuck. I've personally almost exclusively used S-isomer, so I don't have enough experience with both types when tripping myself to accurately compare them, but to be honest, at this level, your set and setting will probably have more significant effects than which type of ketamine you end up taking, especially because most ketamine is a blend of both types anyways. Overall, I've got to say that responsibly mixing ketamine and psychedelics is one of my favorite and most insanely profound combinations I've ever tried, but definitely not for newbies. If you think I missed anything, I'd love to hear about it below, otherwise I'd really appreciate a like. Check out some of our other videos if you're new, and now you can go watch that Mr. Beast video guilt-free because you made it to the end.